Focus on Headline. All right, let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, first off, joining us in the studio, we have our usual reporter, a veteran reporter in Yoon Seong. Yoon Seong, hello to you.
Hi, thank you for calling me a veteran reporter.
I mean, you have been here for quite a bit, so now you are a veteran. I say this because we have a new member of our Korea Now team. Of course, we continue to expand our reporter pool here. Kim Min-ji joins us in the studio for the very first time. Min-ji, hello to you.
Hello, nice to meet you all.
Well, it's good to have you on the program. Of course, she is going to be a part of our reporting pool. That we have a very talented pool of reporters here on Focus on Headline. Well, nevertheless, we are going to kick things off with President Yoon Suk-yeol. Of course, he's been quite busy when it comes to diplomacy. He's been visiting a number of country holding summits left and right. Well, he is first off going to be attending the meeting of the Bureau International des Expositions, excuse my French, which is scheduled to be held in Paris next week. And this is part of his efforts, obviously, to promote South Korea's bid to bring the 2030 Expo to the city of Busan. Sam, you're going to start us off. Give us his, his trip to Paris to kick things off.
Sure. President Yoon Suk-yeol will attend the Bureau International des Expositions, or BIE's General Assembly in Paris, France, set for next Tuesday and Wednesday to support Busan's success in hosting the 2030 World Expo. Yoon will also meet with French President Emmanuel Macron during his stay in Paris. The port city of Busan, which is also South Korea's second largest city, is currently competing with Italy's Rome, Ukraine's Odessa, and Saudi Arabia's Riyadh. President Yoon disclosed his schedule himself through a statement at a cabinet meeting broadcast live from the presidential office in Yongsan on this Tuesday morning. And during the cabinet meeting, President Yoon emphasized the efforts from different sectors to win the bid, saying that so far the government, the private sector, the central and local governments have made all-out efforts to host the Busan Expo, and I myself also tried to promote Busan whenever I met world leaders. Well, early in April, the BIE delegation visited Busan for an on-site inspection, and as they wrapped up their trip, the chief of BIE gave a very hopeful message saying Busan has everything needed to host the 2030 World Expo. So hope this will be an opportunity to present the vision of the Busan once again as the most suitable place to host the upcoming World Expo. In the meantime, Yoon will travel to Vietnam after he wraps up his trip to Paris and is expected to hold a summit with Vietnamese President Vo Van Trung on Friday.
Again, we've been talking extensively about the hopes of Busan getting the host city rights for the 2030 World Expo, and it seems like Italy is not amongst the front runners there. They have been talking about Ukraine's Odessa being sort of a symbolic move to have them host a city. But of course, with the current situation right now, geopolitical situation, and although we are only at 2023 and there's 7 years away from anything being hosted in Ukraine, a lot of cloudy prospects for Odessa so far. I know that Saudi Arabia's Riyadh was the front runner, but when the inspection team came through recently, they said they were a bit disappointed with the lack of preparations for some of the facilities over in Riyadh. So again, South Korea does have a very, very good shot at this, and obviously this is going to be a major step forward in trying to get that host rights as President Yoon Suk-yeol does go over to the BIE. Let's move on here. Talk about other issues. Of course, North Korea-related issue has been the hot topic over the past few months now. South Korea and the United States agreeing to additional efforts to block funds from entering North Korea to prevent its nuclear and missile development activities. Now, the two countries highlighted the importance of their alliance and highlighted that the North's escalatory behavior will have consequences. Minji, tell us more about this.
Sure. So South Korea and the U.S. will no longer go silent on North Korean provocations. South Korea's top nuclear negotiator Kim Gun and U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Sung Kim, held a joint press conference after their meeting in Washington on Monday, stating that the two countries will further reinforce their efforts to prevent funds from flowing into North Korea's proliferation activities. So such response came after North Korea's recent botched attempt to launch what it claimed was a military military reconnaissance satellite. After its failed attempt, North Korea announced plans for additional launch of the so-called satellite. Both Kim Gon and Sung Kim emphasized that it is important for North Korea to realize that its provocations will lead to consequences. So the two countries agreed to exert more efforts to definitely cut off funds to North Korea's nuclear and missile development program. The U.S. envoy highlighted Washington's commitment to engaging in North Korea while making clear that it seeks dialogue with Pyongyang without any preconditions. Kim Gon and Sung Kim both reiterated the strength of U.S.-ROK alliance as well as South Korea-U.S.-Japan cooperation, which has become closer over the past year, and that it will continue in the UNSC setting as well.
That's right. And of course, we did talk about in regards to this meeting with an expert yesterday, and it is one of those like regular meetings and nothing really significant coming out from this. But again, we continue to see that the United States is open to holding dialogue with Pyongyang without any preconditions. I mean, this is a line that we've heard for many, many years for now. But again, no movements from each side, at least from Pyongyang's, because the consensus right now is that North Korea wants the sanctions relief first, and of course the United States not offering that whatsoever. Nevertheless, we also have the deputy commander of the U.S. Space Force, who says the current data sharing system for North Korean missiles between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan is outdated, is what he said, and needs to be improved. Seong, tell us about his remarks.
Sure. The deputy commander of the U.S. Space Force, David Thompson, said the current North Korean missile warning data system shared by Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo requires improvement, and three countries need to create a new design for missile warning and tracking. He made such remarks during a Q&A session at a forum on space security hosted by the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies, a private U.S. institute. Deputy Commander Thompson pointed out that Washington has provided missile warning information to Seoul and Tokyo for the past few decades, and many other countries as well, through various means, but the mechanism for providing data is relatively complicated and in some cases slower than it needs to be. He then went on to say that this could be a problem if North Korea launches ballistic missiles towards South Korea and Japan, and for that reason, the information sharing structure, which was installed in the 1980s, should be further improved amid escalating North Korean missile threats. Earlier, South Korea, the U.S., and Japan agreed to establish a real-time data sharing mechanism by the end of this year to improve each country's capabilities to detect missiles launched by North Korea at the 20th Asia Security Conference, so-called Shangri-La Dialogue, held in Singapore earlier this month. And previously, South Korea and the U.S. and Japan shared such data in real time, and information was shared between Korea and Japan through the U.S. Military indirectly, not in real time. But through the Shangri-La Dialogue, South Korea, the U.S., and Japan now will work on establishing a real-time information sharing network among three countries. So in addition to the recently emphasized security alliance among Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo, the intelligence sharing system citing North Korea's missile threats, such as Thompson's remarks, the trilateral security cooperation is expected to be further strengthened. On the other hand, there are concerns that such security alliance should not harm South Korea's diplomatic interests by further blocking the path of dialogue with North Korea or further provoking countries that the U.S. is keeping in check, such as China.
Well, I mean, North Korea naturally, when they see that they're going to be, there's any kind of trilateral military alliance between the three sides, and especially when it gets the United States involved, they're not going to feel happy with this, right? They're going to they call this a provocation, but it isn't concerning. I did not know that this information sharing system was installed in the 1980s of all time.
Very outdated.
Yeah, it's very it's very outdated. And in fact, one of the criticisms, remember when the text message that came through, the warning text message when North Korea test fired their space launch vehicle, they were saying that even that, it was a bit late. Right. I mean, we were all upset that we were woken. Well, I was at work, but a lot of people woke into an alarm saying that, actually, there was no information as to why there was an alert and why everyone had to evacuate. But judging by the time when the text message was sent, they were saying it was a bit late. So if you take into consideration in the worst case scenario, and we hope that this never happens, obviously, that North Korea does end up firing some kind of missile towards South Korea, it would have been too late, right? And so obviously getting the most real time information is the crucial part, and we're just hoping that we never have to use it, but obviously we could kind of test out the system when they do test their ballistic missiles, as they have been doing so for some time now.
And the false alert incidents happens more frequently in Japan because they can't share the information directly with South Korea.
Yeah, their problem was, I mean, we saw the flaws in their the missile system, because there were times when South Korea correctly said that there was like one missile that was fired or something like that, or like two missiles fired, but Japan's missile system basically had the incorrect number of missiles that were fired. So Japan actually does
really
have a whole...
wants the system to be improved.
This is why, even despite the improved relations between South Korea and Japan, that Japan really wanted this information. But now that the relations are better off now, obviously they could share all this. But while we had been seeing an improved relations between Seoul and Tokyo, Seoul and Beijing, that's a different story, because it certainly turned for the worst when South Korea summoned China's ambassador to South Korea in regards to its comments on President Yoon Suk-yeol's administration's foreign policy. Now, there are concerns, obviously, that this will trigger further conflict between the two neighboring countries. So, Minji, tell us what this is all about.
Sure. So tensions flare as South Korea summons Chinese ambassador to South Korea, Sing Hae-min, to sternly warn and express strong regret over unreasonable and provocative remarks that violated diplomatic protocols during a dinner with the representative of the South Korean opposition party, Lee Jae-myung. So meanwhile, China defended Ambassador Singh's action that it was part of its official duties to enhance understanding and promote cooperation between the two countries. It said that South Korea needs to deeply reflect on where the problem lies in relations between the two countries and take it seriously. So China's state media is also criticizing South Korea and supporting Singh, for example, by highlighting resistance within South Korea, including the main opposition party. So it was a tit-for-tat move that came a day after the South Korean Foreign Ministry summoned Singh to protest against his comments, accusing Seoul of tilting towards the United States. So diplomatic row between South Korea and China comes amid fierce competition between the U.S. and China for global influence. Indeed, it has quite been a struggle for South Korea to strike a balance between the U.S., a decades-long military ally, and China, the biggest buyer of its goods. And the diplomatic breakthrough between Seoul and Tokyo in March struck even stronger anger in Beijing, which discouraged South Korea from engaging in closer economic and defense ties with the U.S. and Japan. So Singh accused Yoon's government of leaning excessively towards the U.S. and damaging its relations with China. So he said South Korea was entirely to blame for the quote-unquote many difficulties in bilateral relations. So currently the presidential office is waiting for China to take an appropriate measure following controversial remarks made by its ambassador in Seoul over South Korea's ties with the United States. However, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Yanbin refrained from answering South Korea's request and rather raised questions on South Korean media's report on Ambassador Singh.
Yeah, and again, we've been talking about the export trade deficits that South Korea has been facing, and because China was a major export partner to South Korea, and a lot of the goods going over to China, and ever since there's been a lack of goods flowing into China, we've seen this trade deficit happen. And that is the reason why for the longest time many of the previous administrations have been trying to balance the relations with both the United States and China, which is obviously very difficult when the United States continues to pressure. But the difference we've been seeing is that previously in cases like this, China has been sort of responding with severe retaliatory measures. We've seen with like the THAAD deployment, they basically banned any Korean contents from entering into China, and there was a low number of Chinese tourists heading into Korea, which, the tourism industry, obviously a major factor into Korea's economy. But we're not seeing sort of a stronger response from China, which I think reflects South Korea's bigger role, influence in the global community now. Now, China can't threaten South Korea as easily, but still, I guess trade aspect is the sort of the worrying aspect of kind of deteriorating ties between the two countries. But again, the situation very concerning, and the result may have a very worrisome cycle. Now, can you tell us a bit now about the Global Times, which is, of course, China's state media, and how they reported on this situation as well?
Well, for starters, the Global Times, which is a daily tabloid newspaper under the Chinese Communist Party's flagship newspaper, the People's Daily, expressed dissatisfaction over South Korea's remarks on Chinese Ambassador Sing Hae-ming. So it emphasized that Sing's actions were to enhance understanding and promote cooperation and development of China-South Korea relations. It also reported that the current difficulties and challenges in China-South Korea relations were not caused by China, and that relevant parties in South Korea should focus on how to handle problems and realize stability and growth of China-South Korea relations. So according to the Global Times, Sing told Democratic leader Lee Jae-myung that South Korea is gradually falling into U.S.'s strategic trap to contain China, warning that betting that the U.S. would be victorious over China if it pressured China with all its might would certainly come to regret it later. It also criticized President Yoon Suk-yeol for copying the United States' position on Taiwan issue, and that the South Korean government needs to pause and reflect before taking the next step. So some point out that China's intent is to blame South Korea for the deteriorating China-South Korea relations and at the same time cause division within the Korean media and the Korean people.
Well, I mean, we've been seeing sort of a division within the Korean media and the Korean people ever since, I guess, the presidential election last year. But this is also causing somewhat of a rift as well. In the meantime, speaking of China, the White House says China appears to be using pressure tactic over the recent controversies regarding the remarks made by the Chinese ambassador to South Korea, Sing Hae-ming. Tell us more about this.
Yes, White House National Security Council Coordinator John Kirby said the current remarks made by Chinese ambassador to South Korea, Sing Hae-ming, which warned that betting on Washington's win and Beijing's loss will surely bring regrettable results, appear to be aimed at putting pressure on Seoul. He then said South Korea is an independent sovereign state that is a great ally and friend, which has every right to decide on foreign policies that are deemed appropriate. In line with this, Kirby also noted that he especially appreciates South Korea's continued support for Ukraine, encouraging Seoul to join Washington when making political or diplomatic decisions, especially when dealing with global issues.
In the meantime, the U.S. also expressing some concerns that North Korea could be sending more weapons to Russia. And we've been talking about how Russia is in a dire need of ammunitions, and there's been some speculations and reports that North Korea has been selling ammunitions to Russia. Now, of course, Russia has denied these facts, but there are apparently evidences to show that they have been selling it. Well, there could be more weapons coming in, and Russia right now currently needs all the help as they can, as Ukraine has been getting all the help from the Western allies. And now this is all because of these remarks made by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who said Pyongyang will strengthen strategic cooperation with Moscow. So what's this about, Seong?
Yes, according to Reuters on Monday, a U.S. State Department spokesman said that Washington is concerned that North Korea is planning to send more military equipment to Russia, referring to Kim Jong-un's congratulatory message to Russian President Vladimir Putin on Russia's national holiday, hinting at the North's efforts to strengthen cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow. The U.S. announced late last year that North Korea provided weapons to Wagner Group and that there is possibility of additional supplies, and North Korea immediately denied it, but the U.S. refuted it by releasing satellite images to provide the evidence. In addition, the U.S. previously said that Russia is actively seeking to acquire additional weapons from North Korea in exchange for food aid. Well, if this really happens, the polarization or teaming up of South Korea, the U.S., Japan versus North Korea, China, and Russia will intensify. And in that case, we can't leave out the possibilities of this bipolarity posing a threat to global peace.
Yeah, at least when it comes to the Ukraine issue, China has been kind of holding back, right? They don't want to get mixed in with Russia, which is obviously good news for many, many reasons. But it is interesting the way that they're allegedly providing weapons to Russia because they're not providing weapons to Russia directly, right? So the Wagner Group is basically a private military group that's fighting in line with Russia. And so a lot of the soldiers that are on the front line are from the Wagner Group. And we've talked about before the Wagner Group head coming out saying that I'm really upset about the lack of military assistance that Russia is giving out. And we're going to be leaving the war. We're going to ditch the war after their, what was the recent, Victory Day, after Victory Day. And then, there was like everything was good again. So basically, this is kind of the loophole they're saying is basically they're not assisting Russia. They're assisting a private company, Wagner Group.
Not directly.
Yeah, not directly. But as you know, there's been a whole lot of loopholes when it comes to this war in Ukraine. And it is very, very unfortunate here. Let's move on to some international affairs, and we're also going to be talking about the Ukraine war as well in just a bit. But first off, the United States have added a number of Chinese firms to its entity list of its latest export crackdown by the United States. Minji, let's get the details of this.
Sure. So U.S. Department of Commerce has added a bulk of Chinese entity to its entity list. So 43 entities were added to an export control list, including Aviation Industry Corporation of China, or AVIC, and other aviation-related firms for training Chinese military pilots and other activities that threaten the U.S. national security by using NATO source. The Commerce Department also added that AVIC 612 Research Center is affiliated with developing hypersonic weapons and designing and manufacturing air-to-air missiles. Shanghai Supercomputing Technology, which procured or attempted to procure U.S.-made products to support Chinese military, were also added to the entity list. Furthermore, the Frontier Service Group, a security and aviation company active in China, Kenya, and Laos, were included as well. So companies on the list are restricted from receiving U.S. exports for activities that are deemed to be contrary to U.S. interests.
Yeah, so basically, if there's any company that's selling goods to the Chinese military, it's no good now. And I mean, it's some people are like, well, then China can then start banning exports of goods to the U.S. Military, which, by the way, there is a whole lot of, right? Which is why, and then they say it's double standards. Like, well, why are you doing this to us when we haven't done this? And then when, of course, a good example of this was when China banned the sales of Micron goods, and the U.S. got very, very upset, despite the fact that a lot of the goods going into China have been banned. So again, we're going to continue to see this kind of exchange of export bans between the United States and China. In the meantime, Ukraine, which has officially launched its major counteroffensive, says it has recaptured 7 villages from the Russian forces. Now, yesterday when we talked about this, we were saying that the latest number was 3. Now it has been up to 7. This is in the country's south and southeast. Seong, give us the more latest on this.
Yes, like you just said, SJ, yesterday on the show, we reported that Ukraine had recaptured its 3rd village from Russia. And on Monday local time, Ukraine officials claimed that its troops recaptured 7 villages so far since it began its long-anticipated counteroffensive against Russia, including Strodov in the eastern Donetsk province. According to Reuters, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said in a video address released on Monday night that the battle is fierce, but Ukrainian troops are moving forward, adding the enemy's loss is exactly what we need. However, with Russian troops still controlling 40,000 square miles of Ukrainian lands, the territory recovered by Ukraine is still very small. In the meantime, the Russian government has not officially acknowledged the advance of Ukrainian troops, saying it has repelled Ukrainian attacks in various places.
That's right. Now, here is the thing that I think the vast majority of the international community are sort of rooting for Ukraine to take back the territory that's been lost. I mean, this is why there was the counteroffensive was a highly anticipated military move by Ukraine. But right now, again, we've talked about how Russia, the war is not going like the way that Russia had hoped that it was going to go. They thought they were going to be in and out in a few months. They're going to come out victorious and, game over. But obviously with the Western allies assisting Ukraine for somewhat, it's been extended for over a year now. And it seems like now the backs are against the wall for Russia. Now, what happens now is, sure, we could be very happy with the gains that Ukraine is getting right now, albeit it's small gains right now. But this may trigger, according to some experts, Russia eventually using tactical nuclear weapons. And this is the big concern right now. Minji, tell us more about this.
Sure. So 17 months into war in Ukraine, the war has now entered a crucial phase with Ukraine advancing to counterattack Russia. So the Ukrainian military says it liberated 3 villages in the southeast of the country, including Neskuchine, Makariuka, and Blaudatny. So Russia has also argued that it hit the Ukrainian military in various spots. The New York Times proposed 2 standards for a successful counteroffensive operation on the side of Ukraine. So the first is for the Ukrainian military to reclaim areas occupied by Russia and maintain them. And the second is for the Ukrainian military to succeed in making a strike that weakens Russia and therefore making Russia to question their military options in Ukraine. So recovering Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant would also be assessed as a symbolic and strategic victory for Ukraine. But at the same time, New York Times reported that some Western officials are worried that Ukraine's counteroffensive be too successful. So according to them, if this scenario actually becomes a reality, it may trigger Vladimir Putin to mobilize more military power. U.S. intelligence agencies also point out that there's potential for Putin to order the use of nuclear weapons if Russia completely loses the war or the Crimean Peninsula.
Yeah, so we got reports, I believe, that Vladimir Putin has ordered the mobilization of the tactical nuclear weapons over to Belarus. Now, I mentioned this yesterday, but, Russia basically said, hey, listen, the United States, they're mobilizing tactical nuclear weapons all over the world. It's no different from us. But the big difference here is that the U.S. actually doesn't use the technical nuclear weapons that are, planted in different parts of the world. It's more of a deterrence, whereas we've seen with Russia, they could potentially use these tactical nuclear weapons. And although it's not like a major nuclear weapon, like, for example, like the atomic bomb or something like that, still it could kill tens of thousands of innocent people in Ukraine. And this is the big concern right now. So a lot of people are keeping a close tab on what's going to happen in July, because apparently that's when these tactical nuclear weapons are going to be mobilized into Belarus. In the meantime, we had NATO officially beginning its 2023 Air Defender military exercise on Monday. Now, this is the largest ever joint air drill taking place in Germany. We have 23 NATO countries and non-member Sweden also taking part in this exercise as well. So let's get the details of this.
Yes, the exercise, which will be led by Germany, will continue until June 23rd, and it will involve about 250 military aircraft and up to 10,000 troops from 23 NATO countries, including the newest member Finland and non-member states Japan and Sweden. The exercise aims to strengthen interoperability and readiness to protect NATO countries from drones and cruise missiles in case if the cities, airports, or ports in their territory are attacked. Although Ingo Gerhardt, German Air Force Lieutenant General, while announcing the drill last week, said the joint drill is not targeting anyone. The exercise is expected to send a clear message to Russia amid the ongoing war in Ukraine. Indeed, Amy Gutmann, the U.S. ambassador to Germany, said the drill will unquestionably show the agility and the swiftness of allied forces and aims to deliver the message to Russia and others that poses threats.
Now, in the meantime, we're going to move on to other issues here. I guess this is somewhat of a positive news for some of these South Korean firms in China. The United States, they're looking to extend the suspension of export controls for South Korean semiconductor companies who have factories over in China. Obviously, some good news as these companies have been asking for some extension or at least a grace period. Minji, you have more on this.
Right. So Washington is planning to allow top semiconductor manufacturers from South Korea to maintain and expand their existing chip-making operations in China. The Wall Street Journal reported that the U.S. Undersecretary of Commerce for Industry and Security, Ellen Estevez, told an audience at an industry gathering last week that the U.S. government plans to extend exemptions for South Korean chip manufacturers with facilities in China for the time being. The remark came despite calls in the U.S. to reconsider such such exemptions for South Korean semiconductor manufacturers like Samsung and SK Hynix, given China's recent ban on U.S. memory chip giant Micron Technology. So although the original grace period expired in October, the exemptions are expected to be extended for a considerable period of time. The Wall Street Journal warned that the latest decision may weaken U.S. export controls that aim to slow down China's technological progress, and the U.S. government is considering preparing separate standards for Korean companies producing semiconductors in China. The Korean industry, on the other hand, is quite positive towards Washington's decision, anticipating that much of the uncertainties may be resolved soon.
And we are hoping that it does get resolved real soon here, especially because the whole Micron ban, it would have been a very good news for South Korean firms, but obviously we have the United States again kind of trying to prevent them from taking that market share there. We've also been talking about quite a bit in regards to some of the major labor unions and the South Korean government really clashing, especially in regards to the Yoon administration's labor reforms, and the confrontation between the two sides have reached new heights as they ran into head-on clash on the international stage this time. So, Sam, what exactly is this about?
Yes, the two major labor unions in South Korea asked the International Labor Organization, or ILO, to speak out to prevent the Korean government's hostile policy for labor suppression. And in response, a senior official at the Ministry of Employment and Labor dismissed the claim and refuted that the labor community should follow laws and principles. According to the labor community on Monday, the chairman of the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions and the Secretary General of the Federation of Korean Trade Unions, who are attending the 111th ILO General Assembly in Geneva, Switzerland, claimed that the Korean government is worsening labor management relations to the levels seen during the dictatorship 30 years ago. And the government is not listening to the voices of labor unions at all, and dialogue has also been completely suspended. Meanwhile, Vice Minister of Employment and Labor Kwon Ki-seop, who attended the ILO General Assembly on behalf of the government, took a firm stance against this claim. And in a keynote speech, he said government's policy is to prevent illegal means such as violence, threats, and coercion, and to stop actions that harm public interest. The ILO Director General reportedly said that he was surprised to hear about South Korean government's crackdown on laborers, and he's closely watching the situation. But we are not sure for now if ILO's intervention will play a certain role in changing the current atmosphere amid the Yoon administration's hardline stance on labor unions and the remaining gray areas between legitimate protests and illegal actions.
Yeah, and certainly what's also interesting in regards to this is we've been seeing, again, improved relations between the United States and South Korea, right? And the Biden administration, Joe Biden especially, has been very big on the whole idea of labor unions and so forth, which is why he made a mistake when he visited the Samsung semiconductor chip, I think it was last year, talked about the importance of labor unions when Samsung doesn't have a labor union. But Joe Biden is not going to mention any of this. Like, it's a big thing that it's gone to the international stage now. It doesn't look good for the Yoon administration. But the thing is, the Biden administration is not going to mention this and, call out the Yoon administration, because for them, there are bigger things to gain from the Yoon administration, as they've been sort of very good with following what the U.S. has been requesting, and especially with the whole for the Biden administration, the semiconductor thing is a bigger issue, and so we'll see how much further this goes. Speaking of the labor unions, another issue that was at hand was the meeting in regards to next year's minimum wage. It's the fourth one of its kind. This is going to be held soon. Negotiation on applying different minimum wage depending on different business type is also going to be discussed. And we talked about the controversy in regards to this. And obviously with this meeting, we are going to see the tension between the labor and the ministry side here, the labor circle and the ministry side. Minji, tell us more about this.
Sure. The fourth negotiating session for next year's minimum wage will be held on the 13th at Government Complex Haejong. So discussions on whether to apply minimum wage based on different business types will be made. So employers' members are arguing for a lower minimum wage for business types like lodging industry that lack the ability to pay wages. They emphasize that the minimum wage bite, which refers to the rate of those who are not able to receive minimum wage, differs depending on different business types. So minimum wage bite of last year recorded 12.7% and was the highest in agriculture, forestry, and fisheries business at 36.6% and lodging business at 31.2%. However, employee members concerned that it will cause a labeling effect and damage the soundness of the labor market. So in other words, wages for businesses with different minimum wage application will decrease, which may result in a drop in people wanting to concern jobs. The Minimum Wage Commission is reportedly planning to vote on the differential application of the minimum wage after Ryu Gi-seop, Secretary General of the Federation of the Korea Trade Union, returns from the 111th International Labor Organization's General Assembly in Geneva, Switzerland.
Yeah, again, we talked about the controversy in regards to raising minimum wage depending on the sector here, but logically it is going to cause so much problems, right? Like just like Minji said, I mean, it's gonna. A lot of people are gonna. Well, if the minimum wage is gonna be increased over there, I'm gonna all head. They're all gonna head over there, right? And there's gonna be very upset people, obviously, who say their sector isn't going to get a whole lot. Because think about it, if this is not going to happen ever, but if Arirang says, we're going to give all the hosts a raise, but you reporters, your minimum wage is going to be kept the same, there's going to be a whole lot of upset reporters, and I'm not going to have the wonderful pool of reporters that I have on Focus on Headline anymore. So probably be a bad example. But we'll see how this meeting is going to unfold for the time being. Nevertheless, guys, thank you very much for your report today. Also, a whole lot of messages welcoming Minji to our show. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a safe one, and we'll see you guys again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang Radio application, or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.